In a remote valley, long before the first history books were ever written, someone placed a stone exactly where it still stands today. Not randomly, not carelessly, but with a precision that modern archaeologists are still trying to understand. Across deserts, mountains, and forgotten coastlines, ancient builders left behind structures that seem almost deliberate in their mystery. Walls that align with the stars. Cities planned with geometry that should not yet have existed. Symbols carved into stone that no language has been able to fully explain. Each discovery raises a new question. How did ancient people know so much about the world around them? And why did they choose to encode that knowledge in monuments that would survive for thousands of years? Today, archaeologists carefully excavate these places layer by layer. Yet the deeper they dig, the more the past begins to feel less like a simple story of early civilization, and more like a puzzle that humanity has only just begun to understand. Across the ancient Mediterranean, most prehistoric monuments follow recognizable patterns. Stone circles rise across the plains of Britain, megalithic temples appear on the islands of Malta, and chambered tombs stretch across Atlantic Europe. These structures differ in detail but share a familiar architectural language of the Neolithic world. Yet on the island of Sardinia, archaeologists discovered something that seems completely out of place. A massive stepped platform with a long ascending ramp leading to a ceremonial summit. Known today as Monte da this enigmatic monument has become one of the most puzzling structures of prehistoric Europe. A site that appears strangely similar to the ziggurats of Mesopotamia, despite being built thousands of kilometers away and centuries earlier than many of those famous temples. Monte da lies in northern Sardinia near the modern city of Sassari. For centuries, the structure appeared only as a low hill scattered with stones, partially buried beneath soil and vegetation. Local farmers had long been aware of the mound, but its true nature remained unknown until systematic archaeological work began in the mid-20th century. In the 1950s, Italian archaeologist Ercole Contu initiated excavations that gradually revealed the shape of an enormous artificial platform hidden beneath the earth. As the soil was removed, a striking structure emerged, a monumental stone ramp stretching upward to a large rectangular platform. The layout resembled nothing previously known in the prehistoric archaeology of Europe. Radiocarbon dating and artifact analysis soon revealed that Monte da was constructed during the Neolithic and Early Copper Age, roughly between 4000 and 3000 BCE. This makes the monument extraordinarily ancient, built during the same broad era that saw the emergence of early farming societies across Europe, and the rise of monumental stone architecture such as the temples of Malta or the passage tomb complexes of Ireland. Yet while those sites follow recognizable architectural traditions, Monte da stands apart in both design and scale. Its long ramp and elevated sanctuary platform evoke a structure that seems almost ceremonial in nature, suggesting that rituals were performed on the summit above the surrounding landscape. Excavations soon revealed that the monument was not built in a single phase. Beneath the visible structure, archaeologists discovered evidence of an earlier construction stage, dating to around 4000 BCE. The original monument appears to have been a smaller raised platform, likely used for ceremonial or ritual activities. Sometime centuries later, this early structure was deliberately covered with layers of earth and stone, effectively burying it. On top of this buried platform, builders constructed a larger and more imposing monument. The new structure included a longer ramp, expanded terraces, and a broader ceremonial platform. This deliberate rebuilding raises an important question that archaeologists still debate today. Why did the builders choose to bury the original monument rather than simply modify or expand it? Some researchers suggest that the act of covering the earlier structure may have been part of a ritual transformation, marking a shift in religious beliefs or social organization. The summit of Monte da appears to have functioned as a ceremonial altar. Archaeologists discovered large stone surfaces that may have served as platforms for offerings or rituals. Surrounding the monument, excavations uncovered remains of animal bones, pottery fragments, and traces of fire, all suggesting that sacrificial ceremonies or ritual feasting took place at the site. These findings indicate that Monte da likely served as a focal point for religious gatherings, where communities may have assembled for seasonal ceremonies tied to agricultural cycles or cosmological beliefs. The elevated platform would have allowed rituals to take place above the surrounding terrain, giving participants a dramatic visual focal point that reinforced the sacred character of the monument. Additional discoveries around the site deepened the mystery. Near the ramp and platform, archaeologists identified several megalithic stones, including a standing menhir and a large spherical stone. The precise function of these stones remains uncertain. Some scholars suggest they may have been symbolic markers associated with ritual pathways or astronomical alignments, while others believe they were sacred objects used during ceremonies. Although the evidence is incomplete, the arrangement of these stones indicates that Monte Dakodi was part of a broader ritual landscape rather than an isolated structure. One of the most intriguing aspects of Monte Dakodi is its architectural resemblance to the ziggurats of ancient Mesopotamia. Ziggurats, such as those later built in cities like Ur and Uruk, were massive stepped temples with ramps or stairways leading to elevated sanctuaries. At first glance, Monte Dakodi appears strikingly similar. Both feature raised platforms, ceremonial access routes, and a focus on ritual activity at the summit. However, the Sardinian monument predates many of the famous Mesopotamian ziggurats by centuries. Moreover, there is no clear evidence that the communities of Neolithic Sardinia maintained direct contact with the complex urban civilizations of Mesopotamia. This similarity has therefore sparked considerable debate among archaeologists. Some scholars propose that early maritime contacts across the Mediterranean may have transmitted architectural ideas between distant cultures. Others argue that the resemblance is purely coincidental, the result of independent societies discovering similar architectural solutions for elevating sacred spaces. When compared with other European monuments of the same period, Monte Dakodi becomes even more unusual. The megalithic temples of Malta, built during roughly the same era, consist of curved chambers and stone walls arranged in complex ground plans, but lack elevated platforms or monumental ramps. Similarly, sites such as Stonehenge or the passage tombs of Newgrange focus on circular arrangements or burial chambers rather than stepped ceremonial platforms. In contrast, Monte Dakodi presents a distinctly vertical design that emphasizes elevation and ascent, suggesting that the act of climbing the ramp may have been symbolically important during ritual activities. Another unresolved question concerns the organization and labor required to build the monument. Constructing such a platform would have required coordinated effort, planning, and a significant workforce capable of transporting and shaping large quantities of stone and earth. Yet the communities of Neolithic Sardinia are generally understood to have been small agricultural societies rather than large centralized states. This raises intriguing questions about the social structures that enabled the construction of such a complex ceremonial site. Was Monte Dakodi the center of a regional religious network that united multiple communities? Or did it represent the authority of a powerful elite capable of mobilizing labor on a large scale? Despite its apparent importance during the Neolithic and Copper Age, Monte Dakodi was eventually abandoned. Archaeological layers indicate that ritual activity at the site gradually declined after around 2000 BCE. The reasons for this decline remain unclear. There is little evidence of violent destruction or catastrophic events. Instead, it appears that the monument slowly lost its significance as cultural and religious practices evolved. Over time, the structure was covered by soil and vegetation, eventually becoming little more than a mound in the Sardinian countryside. For thousands of years, its true form remained hidden beneath the earth. Today, Monte Dakodi continues to challenge conventional ideas about prehistoric Europe. Its unique design, complex construction history, and mysterious cultural connections make it one of the most intriguing archaeological sites in the Mediterranean. While excavations have revealed much about the structure itself, the deeper questions remain unresolved. Why did Neolithic builders create a monument so different from others in Europe? Was its architecture inspired by distant cultures, or did it emerge independently from local religious traditions? And what rituals once took place on the elevated platform overlooking the surrounding landscape? As archaeologists continue to study the site, Monte Dakodi stands as a reminder that the ancient world was often more interconnected and more complex than we once believed. Hidden beneath layers of soil for millennia, this strange stepped monument still preserves the echoes of rituals and beliefs from a distant prehistoric past. Its ramp, rising slowly toward the summit, invites modern researchers to climb not only toward a physical platform, but also toward deeper questions about the origins of monumental architecture and the forgotten cultures that shaped the earliest sacred landscapes of Europe. The monumental stone pillars rising from the landscape of northern Ethiopia belong to one of the most enigmatic archaeological traditions in Africa. At the heart of the ancient city of Aksumita Stelae Field, dozens of towering monoliths stand or lie scattered across the ground, silent witnesses to the rise of the powerful kingdom of Aksum nearly 2,000 years ago. These structures, known as the Aksumite megalithic stelae, represent some of the largest carved monoliths ever produced in the ancient world. Yet despite more than a century of archaeological research, fundamental questions remain about how they were created, how they were erected, and what deeper purpose they served in the political and spiritual life of the Aksumite civilization. Archaeological awareness of Aksum began to grow in the 19th century, when European travellers documented the enormous stone pillars scattered across the region. Early reports described towering monoliths decorated with intricate carvings that resembled multi-storey buildings. Systematic archaeological work began in the early 20th century, when researchers conducted surveys and excavations around the Stelae Field. These investigations revealed that many of the monoliths were not isolated monuments but markers placed above elaborate underground tomb complexes. Beneath several of the stelae, archaeologists discovered stone-built burial chambers, corridors, and subterranean rooms belonging to elite members of Aksumite society. The discoveries confirmed that the stelae were closely connected with royal funerary traditions. Yet even with this explanation, the scale and complexity of the monuments raised questions that remain unresolved. The most striking feature of the Aksumite stelae is their sheer size. Many of the pillars stand more than 20 metres tall, while the largest ever constructed, the monumental Great Stela of Aksum, originally reached an estimated height of about 33 metres and weighed more than 500 tons. Unlike built structures assembled from many stones, each stela was carved from a single block of granite. The technical challenge of extracting such enormous pieces of stone from quarries, transporting them across rugged terrain, carving intricate architectural details, and then raising them upright in the ground presents one of the central mysteries of the site. Excavations have revealed evidence of ancient quarries several kilometres away from Aksum, suggesting that the stone blocks were transported considerable distances before reaching the monument field. However, the methods used to move these immense monoliths remain uncertain. The Aksumites lived centuries before the development of advanced cranes or mechanical lifting devices. Some researchers propose that large earthen ramps and complex systems of ropes and wooden supports were used to drag the stones into position. Others suggest that massive teams of workers may have gradually manoeuvred the pillars using rollers and lever systems. Yet no definitive archaeological evidence confirms exactly how such operations were carried out. Another remarkable aspect of the stelae lies in their design. Rather than being simple pillars, many are intricately carved to resemble tall multi-storey buildings. Rectangular patterns resembling doors and windows appear along the length of the stone, while horizontal divisions create the illusion of architectural floors stacked one above another. At the top, decorative features mimic roof structures and symbolic elements. This carved facade has puzzled archaeologists for decades. The designs suggest that the stelae may represent stylized versions of elite Aksumite architecture, perhaps symbolizing palaces or towers associated with royal authority. Some scholars interpret them as symbolic houses of the dead, representing the eternal residence of powerful rulers buried beneath them. The presence of underground tombs strengthens this interpretation, but it does not fully explain the extraordinary scale of the monuments. In many ancient cultures, burial markers were significant but rarely reached such monumental proportions. Comparisons are often made with the obelisks of ancient Egypt, which were also carved from single pieces of stone and erected as powerful religious symbols. Egyptian obelisks, however, were typically associated with temples dedicated to the sun god Ra, and were covered with hieroglyphic inscriptions celebrating divine kingship. The Aksumite stelae differ in both form and symbolism. Their carved architectural facades suggest a connection to buildings rather than solar monuments, indicating that the cultural meaning behind them may have been fundamentally different. Another comparison emerges with the megalithic traditions found across the ancient world. From the standing stones of prehistoric Europe to the massive statues of Easter Island and the monumental stone platforms of Polynesia, many cultures invested enormous labour into erecting large stone monuments whose exact meaning remains debated. In Aksum, however, the precision of the carvings and the urban context of the monuments indicate a highly organised society capable of large-scale engineering projects. The kingdom of Aksum was not an isolated tribal culture, but one of the major powers of the ancient world. Between the 1st and 7th centuries CE, it controlled trade routes linking the Mediterranean world with Arabia, India, and East Africa. Archaeological evidence shows that Aksum minted its own coins, developed a written language known as Giez, and built sophisticated urban centres. This advanced cultural environment makes the engineering achievements of the Stelae even more intriguing. Perhaps the most dramatic mystery surrounding the monuments involves the collapse of the largest stela ever constructed. The Great Stela of Aksum lies today broken into several pieces on the ground, suggesting that it fell shortly after it was erected. Archaeologists believe that the monument may have collapsed because of structural instability or insufficient foundation support. The immense weight of the stone may simply have exceeded the engineering limits of the builders. If this interpretation is correct, the monument may represent an ambitious attempt by Aksumite engineers to push their construction techniques beyond previously tested limits. The failure of the structure provides rare insight into the experimental nature of ancient monumental architecture. Further excavations around the Stelae field have uncovered additional clues about how the monuments were installed. Archaeologists found deep foundation pits beneath some pillars, indicating that part of the stone was buried underground to stabilize the structure. This suggests that the builders carefully calculated the balance of each monument. However, the deeper the foundations appear to be, the greater the logistical challenge becomes. Digging large pits, lowering massive stones into them, and then raising the pillars upright would have required a coordinated labour force and sophisticated planning. Despite decades of research, many aspects of the Aksumite Stelae remain uncertain. The exact sequence of construction techniques has never been fully reconstructed, and no written records from the Aksumite period describe the building process. Even the symbolic meaning of the monuments continues to be debated. Were they simply markers of royal tombs, or did they serve a broader ceremonial or cosmological function within Aksumite religion? Some scholars believe the monuments may have acted as visual statements of imperial power, demonstrating the wealth and engineering ability of the kingdom to both local populations and foreign traders passing through the region. Today, the Stelae field of Aksum stands as a remarkable archaeological landscape, where history, engineering, and mystery intersect. The towering monoliths, some still standing, others broken across the ground, offer a rare glimpse into the ambitions of an ancient African civilization that once rivaled the great powers of its time. Yet the silence of the stones continues to challenge modern researchers. Without written explanations from the builders themselves, archaeologists must rely on fragments of evidence buried beneath the soil. In this sense, the Aksumite stelae occupy a unique place among the great monuments of the ancient world. Like the pyramids of Egypt, the statues of Easter Island, or the megalithic circles of Stonehenge, they remind us that ancient societies possessed remarkable capabilities that are still not fully understood. Each new excavation reveals more about the lives and beliefs of the Aksumites. But the greatest question remains unanswered. How did a civilization nearly 2,000 years ago carve, transport, and raise some of the largest monolithic structures ever attempted by human hands? The answer may lie somewhere beneath the soil of Aksum, waiting for future discoveries to bring the final pieces of this ancient engineering puzzle into view. Across the granite hills of southeastern Africa lies one of the most extraordinary archaeological landscapes ever discovered on the continent. The stone ruins known as Great Zimbabwe form the largest pre-colonial architectural complex south of the Sahara. Yet the civilization that built it left behind no written records explaining its purpose, its engineering knowledge, or the reasons for its disappearance. Today, towering dry stone walls, mysterious passageways, and a strange conical tower stand as silent evidence of a powerful medieval kingdom whose technological capabilities and urban organization still puzzle archaeologists. The ruins of Great Zimbabwe were known for centuries by local communities, but they first entered the written record in the 19th century when European travellers reached the site. In the 1870s, the German explorer Karl Mauch visited the ruins and reported massive stone structures rising from the landscape. Unable to believe that a complex of such scale could have been built by African societies, he controversially suggested that the ruins might be linked to the biblical land of Ophir or ancient Mediterranean civilizations. These early interpretations reflected the colonial attitudes of the time rather than scientific evidence. Serious archaeological study began in the early 20th century. In 1905, British archaeologist David Randall McIver conducted one of the first systematic excavations. By analysing pottery, tools and cultural remains, he concluded that the structures were built by local African populations rather than foreign civilizations. Later excavations by Gertrude Caton Thompson in 1929 confirmed this conclusion through stratigraphic analysis and artifact dating. Her research demonstrated that Great Zimbabwe was constructed between the 11th and 15th centuries by ancestors of the Shona people, establishing it as a major indigenous urban centre. Despite these discoveries, many aspects of the site's construction and social organisation remain unexplained. The most iconic feature of Great Zimbabwe is the system of massive stone enclosures built entirely from granite blocks. These walls were constructed using a technique known as dry stone masonry, meaning that the stones were carefully cut and stacked without the use of mortar. Some walls rise to heights of more than 10 metres and stretch for hundreds of metres in length. Archaeologists estimate that millions of granite blocks were quarried, shaped, transported, and placed to form the structures seen today. The precision with which these stones fit together is remarkable, especially considering that the builders did not use iron tools comparable to those used in later stone construction traditions. This technique invites comparison with other ancient stone-building cultures. For example, the Inca civilization of South America created similarly precise stone walls at sites such as Machu Picchu and Sacsayhuaman, where blocks were cut to fit perfectly without mortar. Yet these sites appeared several centuries later and thousands of kilometers away. Likewise, the polygonal masonry of ancient Mediterranean fortresses or the megalithic stonework of Aksum in Ethiopia show parallels in scale and durability. However, the walls of Great Zimbabwe possess their own distinctive style. The stones are generally smaller than those used in Inca construction, yet they form large, sweeping curves and towering vertical surfaces that have remained stable for over 6 centuries. How medieval builders organised the labour required to quarry and transport so many stones remains a topic of debate among archaeologists. The largest and most mysterious structure within the complex is known as the Great Enclosure. This enormous elliptical structure, measuring roughly 250 metres in circumference, is surrounded by thick granite walls and contains a labyrinth of narrow passageways and inner spaces. Inside the enclosure stands one of the most puzzling features of the entire site, a conical stone tower approximately 10 metres high. Unlike typical towers, this structure has no entrance, no internal chamber, and no obvious functional purpose. It appears to be entirely solid. Scholars have proposed several theories to explain the tower's meaning. Some suggest it may symbolise a granary, representing the agricultural wealth and fertility of the kingdom. Others interpret it as a ritual monument connected to religious practices or royal authority. Another possibility is that it functioned as a symbolic marker of political power within the royal compound. Yet no archaeological evidence has definitively confirmed any of these interpretations. The tower remains one of the most enigmatic structures in African archaeology. Great Zimbabwe was not simply a ceremonial site, but a large urban settlement. Archaeological surveys suggest that at its peak, the city may have supported tens of thousands of inhabitants across a vast surrounding landscape. The complex itself consists of several distinct zones, including the hill complex, the Great Enclosure, and the valley ruins. The hill complex, located on a granite hilltop, appears to have been the earliest occupied area, and may have served as a political or religious centre. Later expansion moved into the valley below, where stone enclosures were constructed around residential areas and elite compounds. One of the enduring mysteries is the apparent hierarchical layout of the city. Larger stone structures are concentrated in areas believed to be associated with elite residents, while common dwellings were likely made from materials such as wood and clay that have not survived. This spatial organisation resembles urban patterns seen in other medieval civilizations, including Angkor in Cambodia and certain cities of the Islamic world, where royal or ceremonial districts were separated from ordinary residential zones. However, unlike those cultures, Great Zimbabwe left behind no written administrative records to explain how its society was governed. Excavations at Great Zimbabwe have revealed artifacts from distant parts of the world. Archaeologists have discovered Chinese porcelain, Persian glass beads, and imported ceramics that date to the medieval period. These finds indicate that Great Zimbabwe was connected to the vast Indian Ocean trading system that linked East Africa with Arabia, India, and China. Gold mined in the region likely travelled to coastal trading cities such as Kerkouane, where it was exchanged for luxury goods from across the Old World. This raises an important question. How did an inland city hundreds of kilometres from the ocean maintain such extensive trade connections? While caravans likely transported goods between the interior and the coast, the scale of this commerce suggests a highly organised economic network that archaeologists are still trying to fully understand. By the 15th century, Great Zimbabwe began to decline. The population gradually moved away, and new political centres emerged elsewhere in the region, such as Kami and later the Mutapa Kingdom. Several explanations have been proposed for this shift. Environmental pressures may have played a role. Large populations and intensive cattle grazing could have led to deforestation and soil exhaustion. Another theory suggests that changing trade routes along the Indian Ocean may have reduced the city's economic importance, yet none of these explanations fully account for the abandonment of such a monumental urban centre. Archaeologists have found no clear evidence of invasion or destruction. Instead, the decline appears to have been gradual, leaving behind stone walls and structures that would remain standing for centuries. Today, Great Zimbabwe remains one of the most important archaeological sites in Africa. Its stone enclosures testify to the architectural ingenuity and social complexity of a medieval African civilization that once controlled vast trade networks and regional political power. At the same time, many questions remain unanswered. How exactly were the massive walls engineered with such precision? What was the true purpose of the mysterious conical tower? And why did a thriving city that once dominated regional trade eventually fade into silence? These unanswered questions continue to draw archaeologists and historians back to the granite ruins of Great Zimbabwe, where the stones of a forgotten kingdom still guard the secrets of one of Africa's greatest ancient mysteries. Along the windswept shores of Tunisia's Cap Bon Peninsula lies one of the most unusual archaeological sites in the Mediterranean world, the ancient Punic city of Kerkouane. Unlike many famous ancient cities whose ruins were rebuilt, layered, and reshaped across centuries of occupation, Kerkouane presents something remarkably rare to archaeologists, a city that appears to have been abruptly abandoned and never rebuilt again. Because of this unusual fate, the settlement preserves an almost untouched snapshot of life in the Punic world during the 3rd century before the Common Era. Kerkouane was part of the maritime network of the Phoenician-descended civilization centered around Carthage, one of the most powerful trading empires of the ancient Mediterranean. The Phoenicians and later the Carthaginians established colonies across North Africa, Sicily, Sardinia, and the Iberian Peninsula, linking distant ports through commerce and seafaring technology. Yet despite the importance of this network, physical evidence of everyday Punic urban life is surprisingly scarce. Many cities once belonging to Carthage were later rebuilt by the Romans after the Punic Wars, covering earlier structures beneath new architecture. Kerkouane is different. After its destruction around the middle of the 3rd century BCE, the city was never reconstructed by Roman settlers. This absence of later rebuilding turned the site into what archaeologists sometimes call a time capsule of Punic civilization, preserving an authentic view of how a Carthaginian coastal city functioned before the rise of Roman dominance in North Africa. Although the ruins had long been known to local inhabitants, systematic archaeological investigation began only in the mid-20th century. In the early 1950s, French archaeologists began excavating the site, revealing the outlines of an ancient city hidden beneath sand and coastal vegetation. As the excavations progressed, researchers quickly realized they had uncovered something unusual. The urban plan emerging from the soil did not belong to a Roman colony or a later Byzantine settlement. Instead, the structures corresponded to a Punic city dating to the height of Carthaginian influence in the Mediterranean. Walls, houses, streets, workshops, and sanctuaries appeared with remarkable clarity. Because the site had remained largely untouched since antiquity, the city's layout could be studied almost exactly as it existed more than 2,000 years ago. This level of preservation is rare in Mediterranean archaeology. In places such as Carthage itself, The original Punic layers are fragmented or buried beneath later Roman construction. Even famous Phoenician settlements like Monte in Sicily or Gardia in Iberia show evidence of continuous rebuilding. Kerkouane, however, seems to have been frozen in a single historical moment. The final decades before Carthage's struggle with Rome reshaped the entire region. One of the most striking discoveries at Kerkouane is the city's sophisticated urban planning. The streets form a relatively organised pattern, separating blocks of houses that appear to have been carefully designed rather than randomly constructed. While not perfectly geometric like later Roman cities, the layout still suggests deliberate planning by skilled builders and administrators. Many of the houses excavated at Kerkouane reveal architectural features that seem unexpectedly advanced for their time. Several contain central courtyards surrounded by rooms, an arrangement that would later become common in Mediterranean domestic architecture. Some structures include private bathing facilities, stone basins, and complex drainage systems designed to manage wastewater. These discoveries challenge earlier assumptions that Punic cities were less developed in terms of urban infrastructure compared with Greek or Roman settlements. In fact, the houses at Kerkouane suggest a relatively high standard of living and a strong understanding of water management and architectural organisation. When compared with contemporary cities such as the Greek colonies of Sicily or the Etruscan towns of central Italy, Kerkouane demonstrates that Carthaginian urban culture was equally capable of sophisticated planning. Yet the precise origins of these architectural traditions remain uncertain. Scholars continue to debate whether the design reflects influences from Phoenician homeland cities in the Levant, cultural exchange with Greek colonies, or an independent development within the Punic world. Among the most intriguing discoveries at Kerkouane are the remains of installations associated with the production of Tyrian purple, one of the most valuable dyes in the ancient world. The colour was extracted from marine snails of the genus Murex, and its production required a labour-intensive process involving fermentation and chemical transformation. Archaeologists found large accumulations of crushed shells near parts of the settlement, along with vats and basins that may have been used in dye production. These findings strongly suggest that Kerkouane functioned as an industrial centre for the manufacture of purple dye, a commodity closely associated with Phoenician culture and prestige. In the ancient Mediterranean, purple textiles symbolise power and wealth. Greek historians describe the dye as so expensive that only kings and priests and the highest elites could afford garments coloured with it. Carthage, inheriting the maritime traditions of the Phoenicians, maintained a near monopoly over the trade of this luxurious pigment. Yet the exact details of the dye-making process remain partly mysterious even today. Ancient writers such as Pliny the Elder describe the technique only vaguely, and experimental reconstructions by modern researchers show that producing even a small amount of dye required thousands of shells. The scale of shell deposits at Kerkouane suggests that the city may have been deeply involved in this industry, but the precise organisation of production, whether centralised, household-based or state-controlled, remains uncertain. Excavations at Kerkouane have also uncovered a range of religious artefacts connected with Punic belief systems. Among the most prominent are symbols associated with the goddess Tanit, a protective deity widely worshipped in Carthage and its colonies. The so-called Tanit symbol, often depicted as a triangular figure with outstretched arms and a circular head, appears in various forms throughout the site. Other finds include small altars, ritual objects, and fragments of decorative art reflecting a mixture of cultural influences. Some motifs resemble Greek artistic styles, while others appear closer to traditions found in North African or Phoenician contexts. This blending of styles highlights the cosmopolitan nature of the Carthaginian world. As a maritime trading power, Carthage maintained contact with numerous cultures across the Mediterranean basin. Ports such as Kerkouane likely served not only as economic centres, but also as zones of cultural interaction where ideas, technologies, and artistic traditions could circulate. However, the religious practices at the site remain only partially understood. Unlike Greek temples or Egyptian sanctuaries, Punic ritual spaces are often difficult to interpret because fewer written records survive. As a result, archaeologists must rely heavily on material remains to reconstruct the spiritual life of the inhabitants. Perhaps the greatest mystery surrounding Kerkouane is the question of why the city disappeared so suddenly from history. Archaeological evidence suggests that it was destroyed around 250 BCE, during the turbulent period of the First Punic War between Carthage and the expanding Roman Republic. Some scholars believe Roman forces may have attacked and devastated the settlement during naval campaigns along the North African coast. Others suggest that the city could have been abandoned following political upheaval or economic collapse associated with the war. What makes the story particularly puzzling is that the site was never rebuilt afterward. Many coastal cities destroyed during conflicts were eventually resettled because of their strategic locations and access to maritime trade routes. Yet Kerkouane remained deserted. One possibility is that nearby Carthaginian centres absorbed the surviving population, rendering the site unnecessary. Another theory proposes that environmental factors, such as shifting coastlines or changes in trade routes, may have diminished its importance. Without written records from the inhabitants themselves, the final fate of Kerkouane remains largely speculative. Today, Kerkouane occupies a unique place in Mediterranean archaeology. While cities like Carthage, Syracuse, or Athens have been reshaped repeatedly across millennia, Kerkouane stands as a rare example of a Punic city preserved in its original form. For researchers studying the Carthaginian world, the site provides invaluable evidence about architecture, industry, trade, and daily life, in a society that left relatively few surviving texts. In this sense, Kerkouane can be compared to other archaeological time capsules, such as Pompeii in Italy, although the circumstances of preservation are very different. Pompeii was buried by volcanic ash in a single catastrophic event, while Kerkouane appears to have slowly faded from history after a destructive episode linked to geopolitical conflict. Both sites demonstrate how unusual circumstances can freeze a moment of ancient life in place, allowing modern scientists to reconstruct the past with extraordinary detail. Yet Kerkouane also reminds us how much of ancient history remains incomplete. Beneath its quiet ruins lies the story of a coastal community once connected to one of the greatest trading networks of the ancient world. Its streets, houses, and workshops reveal glimpses of a sophisticated society. But the reasons for its disappearance and the full role it played within the Carthaginian system continue to provoke questions. More than 2,000 years after its abandonment, Kerkouane still invites archaeologists and historians to piece together the fragments of a forgotten chapter of Mediterranean civilization, a chapter preserved in stone, sand, and silence. Across the rugged mountains, deserts, and grasslands of northern China stretches one of the most extraordinary structures ever built by human civilization. Known today as the Great Wall of China, this immense system of fortifications extends for more than 21,000 kilometers across northern China. For centuries it has symbolized imperial power, technological ingenuity, and the determination of ancient states to defend their borders. Yet despite its fame, the Great Wall remains one of the most complex and mysterious archaeological landscapes on Earth. Modern research increasingly reveals that the wall is not a single structure, but a vast network of fortifications constructed over many centuries, involving multiple dynasties, changing technologies, and purposes that may have gone far beyond simple military defense. The earliest archaeological evidence suggests that long before the unification of China, various states during the Warring States period had already begun constructing defensive barriers along their northern frontiers. Excavations in regions such as Inner Mongolia and Gansu have uncovered long stretches of compacted earth ramparts dating back to around the 7th to 4th centuries BCE. These early walls were built using a technique known as rammed earth, in which layers of soil and gravel were compressed between wooden frames to create dense, durable structures. Although far less visually impressive than later stone walls, these ancient fortifications reveal that large-scale defensive engineering was already developing centuries before China became a unified empire. Archaeologists studying these early segments often compare them to frontier walls constructed elsewhere in the ancient world, such as Hadrian's Wall, which was built nearly 400 years later. Both structures represent attempts by centralized states to define and control vast borders, yet the Chinese walls were often far longer and integrated into mountainous terrain in ways rarely seen in Roman engineering. The first attempt to link many of these frontier defences into a continuous system is traditionally associated with Qin Shi Huang, the ruler who unified China in 221 BCE. Historical chronicles describe massive labour forces, soldiers, farmers, and prisoners being mobilised to connect and extend earlier walls across northern China. However, Modern archaeology suggests that the process was far more complex than ancient texts imply. Surveys conducted during the 20th and 21st centuries have revealed that many Chinera walls were built rapidly using rammed earth rather than stone, making them vulnerable to erosion. In some regions, only faint ridges in the landscape remain where these early walls once stood. Yet even these subtle traces demonstrate the astonishing scale of the project. Constructing hundreds of kilometers of fortifications across remote mountain ranges and desert basins would have required logistical coordination on a scale rarely seen in the ancient world. One of the most intriguing aspects of the Great Wall is the evolution of its construction technology. While early walls relied primarily on compacted earth, later dynasties dramatically improved the design. During the Ming dynasty, engineers rebuilt large sections using precisely cut stone blocks and fired bricks. Archaeological studies have revealed that the mortar used between these bricks sometimes contained sticky rice mixed with lime, forming a remarkably durable compound. Laboratory analysis has shown that this organic-inorganic mixture created chemical bonds stronger than many traditional mortars, helping explain why many Ming-era sections remain intact after centuries of exposure to wind, rain, and earthquakes. The use of such materials demonstrates a sophisticated understanding of construction chemistry that parallels innovations in other ancient civilizations. For example, Roman builders used volcanic ash to produce hydraulic concrete for structures such as the Pantheon, while Chinese engineers developed organic additives that improved the resilience of lime mortar. Another remarkable feature of the Great Wall is the complex communication system built into its design. Thousands of watchtowers, beacon towers, and signal stations once lined the wall, forming a defensive network capable of transmitting warnings across enormous distances. Historical records describe the use of smoke signals by day and fire signals by night, allowing military information to travel hundreds of kilometers within hours. Some scholars have compared this system to a primitive telecommunications network, centuries before the invention of electrical communication. Archaeological excavations at beacon towers have uncovered remains of signal fires, charcoal deposits, and even bamboo slips documenting military messages. These discoveries provide rare insights into how frontier garrisons operated and how information moved across the vast northern frontier of the Chinese Empire. Yet despite these impressive defensive features, the strategic purpose of some sections of the wall remains puzzling. Satellite surveys and archaeological mapping have revealed stretches of fortifications built across mountain ridges that are already extremely difficult to cross. In certain locations, the wall even appears to face directions that would have offered little advantage against nomadic incursions from the north. This has led some historians to propose that the wall served multiple roles beyond military defense. It may have functioned as a system for regulating trade, controlling migration, and monitoring movement along important routes such as the Silk Road. Frontier gates along the wall often became major checkpoints where merchants and travellers were inspected, taxed, or granted permission to enter imperial territory. In this sense, the Great Wall may have acted not only as a barrier, but also as a mechanism for managing economic and cultural exchange between civilizations. Archaeological research over the past several decades has dramatically expanded our understanding of the wall's true extent. Remote sensing technologies, including satellite imagery and ground-penetrating radar, have revealed previously unknown segments buried beneath desert sands or hidden beneath vegetation. Surveys conducted in the Gobi Desert, for example, have identified long lines of earthen fortifications that were once thought to be natural formations. These discoveries show that the Great Wall was not a single continuous barrier, but a sprawling network of interconnected defences extending across diverse landscapes. In many ways, it resembles other ancient frontier systems, such as the Roman limes in Europe or the defensive earthworks of Central Asian kingdoms. However, the scale of the Chinese system remains unparalleled. Despite centuries of research, many mysteries surrounding the Great Wall persist. Scholars still debate how labour was organised across such vast distances, how materials were transported to remote mountain ridges, and how communication networks were maintained across thousands of kilometres. Equally intriguing is the question of how different dynasties interpreted the purpose of the wall. For some rulers, it may have been primarily a military defence. For others, it may have symbolised political authority or territorial identity. The wall's construction across multiple eras suggests that it was constantly reimagined and repurposed by successive governments, responding to changing geopolitical conditions. Today, the Great Wall stands not only as a monument of ancient engineering, but also as a reminder of the complexity of human history. Each newly discovered section adds another piece to a puzzle that archaeologists are still attempting to solve. Far from being a single structure built at one moment in time, the wall represents centuries of experimentation, adaptation, and technological innovation. As researchers continue to investigate its hidden segments and analyze its materials, the Great Wall increasingly appears less like a simple barrier and more like a vast archaeological archive stretching across the landscape of northern China. Within its stones and earthen ramparts lies a record of ancient ambition, ingenuity, and unanswered questions, an enduring testament to the mysteries of the ancient world. High on a windswept plateau in southern Armenia, near the modern town of Sisyan, stands a prehistoric monument that has puzzled archaeologists for decades. Known as Karahunj, and also referred to as Zoret's Kara, this sprawling arrangement of standing stones is often compared to Stonehenge. Yet despite the nickname the Armenian Stonehenge, Karahunj remains one of the least understood megalithic structures in the world. Its true purpose, age, and cultural origins are still debated, turning the site into one of the most intriguing ancient mysteries of the Caucasus. The monument consists of more than 200 large basalt stones scattered across a plateau roughly 1,700 meters above sea level. Many of the stones stand upright, some reaching heights of 2 to 3 meters and weighing several tons. At the center of the site lies a rough circular formation, surrounded by long lines of stones stretching outward like arms extending across the landscape. When viewed from above, the arrangement appears deliberate rather than random. The layout suggests that whoever constructed Karahunj was following a carefully planned design, yet the meaning of that design remains uncertain. The first systematic attention from modern scholars came during the 20th century, when Armenian archaeologists began documenting the site more carefully. Excavations and surveys carried out in the 1970s and 1980s revealed that the stones were not simply natural formations, but had been intentionally placed by human hands. Archaeological investigations uncovered traces of ancient habitation nearby, including pottery fragments, burial remains, and other cultural materials suggesting that people occupied the surrounding region thousands of years ago. These discoveries confirmed that Karahunj was part of a broader prehistoric landscape, rather than an isolated anomaly. Despite these findings, the exact age of the monument remains controversial. Some archaeologists estimate that Karahunj dates to the Bronze Age, roughly 4,000 years ago. Other researchers argue that the structure could be significantly older, possibly reaching back to the late Neolithic period. A minority of researchers have proposed even earlier dates, suggesting that the site might be more than 7,000 years old. These differing interpretations arise because the stones themselves cannot easily be dated directly, forcing researchers to rely on nearby artifacts and geological clues. As a result, Karahunj's true age remains one of its greatest unresolved questions. One of the most unusual features of the monument is the presence of circular holes drilled through many of the standing stones. Roughly 80 of the basalt pillars contain carefully carved openings that pass completely through the rock. These holes are typically a few centimeters in diameter and appear remarkably precise considering the hardness of basalt. The existence of such holes has generated considerable speculation among archaeologists and archaeoastronomers. Why would ancient builders carve holes through massive stones and orient them toward the horizon? Beginning in the late 20th century, Armenian researcher Paris Haruni proposed a controversial explanation. According to his hypothesis, Karahunj may have functioned as a prehistoric astronomical observatory. Haruni argued that the holes in the stones were aligned with particular points on the horizon where the sun, moon, or bright stars would appear during important celestial events. If correct, the monument could have served as a sophisticated observational platform, allowing ancient skywatchers to track seasonal cycles and astronomical phenomena. The idea of Karahunj as an ancient observatory immediately invited comparisons with other prehistoric monuments associated with astronomy. The stone circle at Stonehenge in Britain, for example, is famously aligned with the summer solstice sunrise and winter solstice sunset. Similarly, the megalithic structures of Nabta Playa in the Egyptian desert have been interpreted as early astronomical markers dating back more than 6,000 years. In Central Asia, ancient steppe cultures also erected standing stones that appear to have symbolic or ritual significance connected to the sky. However, the astronomical interpretation of Karahunj remains highly debated. Some researchers argue that many of the supposed alignments could be coincidental, particularly given the large number of stones at the site. Others point out that erosion and shifting ground over thousands of years may have altered the original orientations. Without clear archaeological evidence linking the monument to astronomical observation, the theory remains intriguing but unproven. Another mystery concerns the technology used to construct the monument. Transporting and erecting basalt stones weighing several tons would have required coordinated labour and engineering knowledge. Yet the cultures believed to have inhabited the region during the late Neolithic and early Bronze Age are not known to have possessed advanced tools or large-scale construction equipment. Archaeologists believe the stones may have been quarried locally and dragged into position using wooden sledges or rollers, but definitive evidence for these methods has not been found at the site. The landscape itself may also hold clues to the monument's purpose. Karahunj sits on a high plateau overlooking a broad valley, offering unobstructed views of the surrounding horizon. This elevated position would have made the site an ideal vantage point for observing both celestial movements and distant landscapes. Some researchers therefore suggest that Karahunj might have served multiple functions simultaneously: a ceremonial gathering place, a burial ground, and possibly a location for observing the sky. Interestingly, the name Karahunj is sometimes translated as speaking stones, or stones that make sound. Locals have long reported that when strong winds pass through the holes in the stones, they can produce faint whistling tones. Although this phenomenon may simply be an acoustic effect of air passing through narrow openings, it has fueled speculation that the monument might once have had ritual or symbolic significance connected to sound. Comparisons with other ancient megalithic sites reveal both similarities and differences that deepen the mystery. Like Stonehenge, Karahunj consists of large standing stones arranged in a patterned layout. Yet unlike Stonehenge, which forms a relatively compact circular structure, Karahunj spreads across a much larger area, with long stone rows extending outward. In this respect, it resembles certain Eurasian steppe monuments, where standing stones were used to mark sacred landscapes or burial territories. Other parallels can be drawn with prehistoric stone alignments found across Europe and Asia, where ancient communities constructed monuments that may have combined ritual, astronomical, and territorial functions. These comparisons suggest that Karahunj was likely part of a broader tradition of megalithic architecture that emerged independently in multiple regions of the ancient world. Even so, the specific purpose of the Armenian site remains unclear. Modern archaeological research continues to investigate the monument using new technologies such as satellite mapping, drone surveys, and geophysical scanning. These methods allow scientists to study the precise arrangement of the stones and the underlying landscape without disturbing the site. Some surveys have revealed additional buried features and patterns that may indicate earlier phases of construction or surrounding structures that have long since disappeared. Despite these advances, Karahunj remains a place where questions far outnumber answers. Who built the monument, and how was the knowledge required for its construction passed down through generations? Were the stones intended to mark astronomical events, or were they part of a ritual landscape whose meaning has been lost to time? And perhaps most intriguingly, why was this remote plateau chosen as the location for such a monumental undertaking? Today, Karahunj stands silent against the winds of the Armenian highlands, its stones weathered by millennia of sun and snow. Like many ancient monuments scattered across the world, from Stonehenge in Britain to Nabta Playa in the Sahara, it reminds us that prehistoric societies possessed a level of organisation, symbolism, and environmental awareness that we are only beginning to understand. The monument's enduring mystery continues to attract archaeologists, historians, and travellers alike, each searching for clues hidden within the stones. For now, the true story of Karahunj remains unfinished. Each new excavation and each new theory adds another fragment to the puzzle, but the full picture of its origins and purpose has yet to emerge. Until that moment arrives, Karahunj will remain one of the most fascinating and enigmatic ancient sites in the world, a silent circle of stones standing guard over secrets that may have been buried for thousands of years. Throughout prehistoric Europe, most early farming communities were small, loosely organised villages. Their houses were built from mud brick or timber, their defences were minimal, and their social structures were relatively simple. Yet in the arid hills of southeastern Spain stands a site that appears to break nearly every expectation archaeologists once had about the Copper Age. Known today as Los Millares, this prehistoric complex reveals an unexpectedly advanced society that existed around 3200–2300 BCE. What makes Los Millares so extraordinary is not just its age, but the scale and complexity of its architecture, its defensive systems, its vast necropolis of megalithic tombs, and its early mastery of metallurgy. Even after more than a century of archaeological research, the site continues to raise questions about how such a sophisticated settlement could emerge so early in European prehistory. The ruins of Los Millares were first identified in the late 19th century, when railway construction near the Andarix River Valley exposed unusual stone structures and tombs scattered across the hills. Initial investigations quickly revealed that this was not a single monument, but an entire prehistoric landscape. Archaeologists soon discovered the remains of a fortified settlement occupying a strategic plateau overlooking a deep ravine. The location itself suggests careful planning. The steep valley provided a natural defensive barrier on one side, while the surrounding hills offered clear visibility across the region. Early excavations carried out by Spanish researchers at the end of the 19th century uncovered dozens of circular stone tombs, along with walls, gates, and evidence of prehistoric habitation. However, it was not until the 20th century, particularly during systematic excavations beginning in the 1950s and continuing through later decades, that the true scale of Los Millares became clear. What researchers found was astonishing. At the heart of the site lies a large fortified settlement protected by multiple concentric defensive walls. These walls were built from stone and reinforced with towers and controlled gateways, forming a complex system of barriers surrounding the central village. Beyond the main fortifications, archaeologists identified a network of smaller outlying forts, often referred to as fortlets, positioned on surrounding hills. Some of these structures appear to have served as watchpoints overlooking the valley and the approaches to the settlement. Together, they created a defensive landscape that extended far beyond the main walls. For a society living during the early Copper Age, this level of military architecture is deeply puzzling. Most European settlements of the same period, such as those belonging to early farming cultures in Central Europe, show little evidence of comparable fortification systems. Even large Neolithic sites rarely display such carefully organised defensive planning. This raises one of the central mysteries of Los Millares. Why was such an elaborate defensive network necessary? One possibility is that the settlement controlled valuable resources. The region surrounding Los Millares contains deposits of copper ore, and archaeological excavations have uncovered evidence of early metalworking within the settlement. Slag, smelting remains, and copper artifacts suggest that the inhabitants were involved in the production and distribution of metal tools and ornaments. During the 3rd millennium BCE, copper metallurgy was still spreading across Europe, and communities capable of producing metal may have gained considerable economic power. If Los Millares served as a regional centre for metallurgy, it may have attracted both trade and conflict. Rival groups seeking control over these resources could have forced the inhabitants to develop unusually strong defences, yet the defensive system remains unusual even when compared to other metallurgical centres of the time. Early copper-producing settlements in the Balkans, such as those associated with the Vinča culture, show evidence of metallurgy, but generally lack the massive fortification network seen at Los Millares. Similarly, the fortified hill settlements of later Bronze Age societies appear centuries after Los Millares reached its peak. This suggests that the community may have faced unique political or environmental pressures that archaeologists still struggle to reconstruct. Surrounding the fortified settlement is another remarkable feature: a vast megalithic necropolis consisting of nearly 100 tombs. These burial monuments are primarily tholos tombs, circular stone chambers built beneath earthen mounds and accessed through narrow corridors. Inside these chambers, archaeologists discovered the remains of multiple individuals, often accompanied by grave goods such as pottery, stone tools, copper ornaments, and decorated objects. The tombs were used repeatedly over generations, suggesting that they served as collective burial places for extended communities or clans. The architectural design of these tombs has attracted particular attention. The tholos structure, with its circular chamber and stone-built dome, resembles burial monuments found in parts of the Aegean and Eastern Mediterranean during later periods. For example, the famous tholos tombs of Mycenaean Greece, built more than 1,000 years after Los Millares, share certain structural similarities. Although the two traditions are separated by time and geography, the resemblance raises intriguing questions about the diffusion of architectural ideas across prehistoric Europe and the Mediterranean. Or did similar burial traditions emerge independently, or were they part of a wider network of cultural exchange linking distant regions long before written history? The necropolis also reveals evidence of social hierarchy within the community. Some tombs are larger and more elaborate than others, and certain burials contain richer grave goods, including finely crafted copper objects and decorative artifacts. These differences suggest that the society of Los Millares may have been more socially stratified than many contemporary Neolithic farming communities. The existence of elite individuals or powerful families could also explain the development of large-scale construction projects, including fortifications and monumental tombs. Another area of mystery concerns the outlying fortlets scattered across the hills surrounding the main settlement. Archaeological surveys have identified more than a dozen of these small fortified structures. At first glance, they appear to function as defensive outposts guarding the approaches to the central settlement. However, many of them are surprisingly small, sometimes containing only a few rooms within their walls. Their limited size raises doubts about whether they could have housed large garrisons. Instead, some archaeologists suggest that they may have served as observation points or signalling stations, forming an early warning system against potential threats approaching the valley. Comparable defensive landscapes are rarely found in other Copper Age societies. In many parts of Europe during the same period, settlements were dispersed and relatively unfortified, even in regions known for early fortified villages such as certain Neolithic hilltop sites in France or Italy. The defensive networks rarely extend as far into the surrounding terrain as those seen at Los Millares. This unique arrangement suggests a level of regional organisation that may have involved multiple communities cooperating under a shared system of protection or authority. Despite its apparent strength and prosperity, the culture associated with Los Millares eventually declined. Around 2300 BCE, the settlement was abandoned. Archaeological layers indicate that activity gradually decreased before the site was finally deserted. What caused this decline remains uncertain. Some scholars propose that climatic changes may have affected agricultural productivity in the region, forcing communities to relocate. Others suggest that shifts in trade networks or technological developments may have weakened the economic importance of Los Millares. Another possibility is that the emergence of a new cultural tradition, known as the El Argar culture, transformed the social landscape of southeastern Iberia. El Argar settlements, which appeared shortly after the decline of Los Millares, display very different patterns of settlement, burial practices, and social organisation. Instead of collective tombs, El Argar societies often buried individuals beneath houses within settlements. Their fortifications and architecture also differ significantly from those of Los Millares. Whether El Argar communities were direct descendants of the inhabitants of Los Millares or represented the arrival of new groups remains a subject of debate among archaeologists. Today, Los Millares stands as one of the most important archaeological sites for understanding the early development of complex societies in prehistoric Europe. Its fortified settlement, extensive necropolis, and evidence of early metallurgy reveal a community that was far more organised and technologically capable than once believed possible for the Copper Age. Yet many aspects of the site remain unresolved. Why did its inhabitants construct such an elaborate defensive system, centuries before similar fortifications became common elsewhere? How did they acquire the architectural knowledge needed to build sophisticated tholos tombs? And what forces ultimately led to the disappearance of this remarkable society? In the broader context of prehistoric Europe, Los Millares challenges traditional assumptions about the pace of technological and social development. When compared with contemporary settlements across the continent, its scale and complexity appear almost out of place. Instead of a simple farming village, it resembles an early centre of regional power, a fortified community controlling trade, metallurgy, and territory. For archaeologists, the site serves as a reminder that the prehistoric world was far more dynamic and interconnected than earlier generations of scholars once imagined. Even after more than a century of excavation and research, the stone walls and tombs of Los Millares continue to guard their secrets, offering only fragments of a story that scholars are still struggling to fully understand.